Hi, this is Evgeny Uskov, and I'm a Russian native speaker who passed the Kanji Kentei Level 1 and Nihongo Kentei Level 1 tests. In this video, I wanted to touch upon a topic of specific mnemonic techniques I have personally been relying on to study the material for the Kanji Kentei test. This said, I cannot absolutely vouch that I have developed them totally by myself, perhaps simply picking them up after having been explicitly or implicitly influenced by insights from other Kanken takers. I have glimpsed over the course of my studies while familiarizing myself with what other people do to study the Kanji Kentei material. I should also say that the techniques mentioned next are not something that I have been using from the very beginning, but a sort of a post hoc result of a retrospective generalizing and conceptualizing certain practices and approaches that I have personally found convenient to use and ended up utilizing them to work with the Kanken material. To start with an obvious general note, in terms of mnemonic techniques in general, everything and anything can be used as a cue for memorization, and unless one is an outlier with a mechanic-style photographic memory, any memorization by default is reliant on some specific conditioning or contextualization of the target content. For the basics, what I can absolutely and definitively say is that, at least for me personally, individual kanji along with their readings and meanings serve as an indispensable foundation for learning vocabulary that is based on such kanji. Thus, it is almost inconceivable and, for that matter, impossible for me to try to learn a word before I have first learned readings and meanings of each individual kanji such a word is written with. And while this approach may be considered as too incremental, in my case, it makes learning more psychologically comfortable and, I would guess, more long-term efficient. On the other hand, one of the consequences of sticking to such a meticulously thorough approach may have been one of the reasons why it took me so long to finally pass the first level of the Kanji Kentei. So this is the basic premise, which can be paraphrased in a statement that I learn kanji first and only then the vocabulary, that is, in a sense of compound words that consist of such kanji. When it comes to individual kanjis, one mnemonic technique I use to learn them, whether intentionally or sometimes otherwise, is breaking them down into constituent parts and applying my own original and totally arbitrary readings to the resultant combination of such parts. Take, for example, this kanji. It is a level pre-1 kanji with an onyomi reading of hin and a kunyomi reading of akiraka. And it is mainly used in the word hinpin. I remember learning it by inventing my own additional reading of ki-ki-san, just for the purpose of memorization. So now, whenever I have to write himpin, I recall that it is a word consisting of two kanjis, which I have named Kiki-san. In a way, this may sound rather convoluted or cumbersome, if not outright ridiculous, but I think the very random, personalized, and an ad hoc nature of this approach allows for its flexible and independent application, tailored to your personal preferences and ideas that you may come up with regarding this or that particular kanji character. So take, for example, this kanji. It has onyo meridians of Shin, San, and kunyo meridians of Kanzashi, Kazasu, Hayai, Atsumaru. By my own designation, this kanji is Take, Kiba, Kiba, Hi, which is made of names for each of its constituent parts. This method can be applied to compound words as well, so a word for a parrot, omo, would be kai kai onna tori mono no futori. Obviously, this is an audio-oriented approach, and people with different memory traits may find different types of mnemonic techniques more useful and suitable to their individual conditions. Among such, we can point out the one relying on cognitive-oriented cues, where instead of readings, mnemonic deconstruction and reconstruction of a kanji is based on its meaning or meanings, or respective meanings of its constituent parts. Thus, instead of take, kiba, kiba, hi, this kanji could be reinterpreted as something like a bamboo with two fans above the sun. But for me personally, such a modus operandi does not work very well, perhaps due to my lack of imagination and an insufficient cognitive bandwidth required to store and process such a heavy information load. Another example of mnemonic techniques I employed is related to Yojijukugo, where if and when possible and when I'm inclined to do so, I read them in a kun-like manner. So, for example, Ame Senso would be narrated as Kaeru ga naku, semi ga sawagashi, or Atsu aku youzen as Ashiki wo todomete, yoki wo ageru. In case of Jukujikun, I sometimes memorize them by adding an intermediary element to connect their graphic representations and seemingly arbitrary readings through supplementing them with an additional onyomi reading where, for example, a kanji combination for a dandelion is read as hokowei. To explain the creation of such a supplementary buffer element between how a jukujikun is written and how it is read serves to add more, for lack of other way to put it, latency or redundancy of a sort which would otherwise lack and thus hinder efficient memorization in light of little logical relation between how a jukujikun is written and how it is read. So, if learning that a combination of kanji is read konagi is difficult, maybe, just maybe, at least that is definitely so in my case, learning that ozetsu stands for konagi might be easier. These were several mnemonic techniques that I personally use when I try to memorize kanji and kanji-based vocabulary. In a strict sense, none of them are functionally limited to the Kanji Kentei studies and can be employed for learning Japanese in general.